Subscribe to Storylab. Now, let's begin this one. Matthew Downey's hands didn't shake anymore. 3 years of civilian life had smoothed the edges that 12 years of black ops had sharpened to a lethal point. He stood in the parking lot of Riverside Elementary, watching parents shuffle through the pickup line, their biggest concerns whether their kids had finished their homework or needed new cleats for soccer. He'd once infiltrated a terrorist cell in Kandahar for 8 months. Now he taught tactical response training to private security firms, a job that paid well enough, and asked few questions about the gaps in his resume. The transition hadn't been seamless. Nothing ever was when you'd seen the things he'd seen. But his daughter made it worthwhile. Ella burst through the school doors, her backpack bouncing against her small frame. At 9 years old, she had his dark eyes and stubborn chin, but her mother's quick smile. She waved when she spotted his truck, nearly tripping over her untied shoelaces in her excitement. "Careful," he called out, moving to meet her halfway. "Dad, guess what? Mrs. Henderson said my essay about the solar system was the best in class." She threw her arms around his waist, and he felt the familiar tightness in his chest, the fear that something this good, this pure, couldn't possibly last. "That's my girl. Your mom would be proud." Ella's smile faltered. "Mom didn't answer when I called last night." Matthew kept his expression neutral as he opened the truck door. Nikki Richmond, she'd taken back her maiden name after the divorce 2 years ago, had been pulling away from Ella gradually, like a tide retreating before a tsunami. The joint custody arrangement was a formality at this point. Nikki saw Ella every other weekend, sometimes less. "She's probably busy with work," he said, though they both knew it was a lie. The truth sat heavier. Nikki had remarried 6 months ago to Shane Carroll, a construction foreman she'd met at a bar downtown. Matthew had done his due diligence, pulled records, checked backgrounds. Shane had 2 DUIs, a restraining order from an ex-girlfriend that was later dropped, and a temper that apparently only surfaced after a few drinks. He'd voiced his concerns during one of their terse exchanges at pickup. Nikki had laughed in his face. "You don't get to judge my life anymore, Matt. You were never around when we were married. Always off on some classified mission." "Well, Shane's here. He's present." Matthew hadn't pushed. The courts favored mothers, and his work history, what little of it could be disclosed, didn't paint him as the stable parent. So he documented everything, kept detailed logs, and waited. That Friday, Ella was scheduled for her weekend with Nikki. She'd packed her overnight bag without enthusiasm, stuffing in her favorite books and the stuffed rabbit she'd had since she was 3. "Do I have to go?" she asked quietly. Matthew crouched down to her level. "It's important to spend time with your mom. Shane doesn't like me." His jaw tightened. "Did he say something to you?" "No. He just looks at me weird, like I'm in the way." She picked at the zipper on her bag. "And Mom's different when he's around. She's mean." "Mean how?" Ella shrugged, a gesture too old for her years. "Just mean." He made a mental note to document this conversation, then helped her into the truck. The drive to Nikki's new house, a rental in a neighborhood that had seen better days, took 20 minutes. Shane's pickup was already in the driveway, along with several other vehicles Matthew didn't recognize. Nikki answered the door, and Matthew barely recognized her. She'd lost weight, her cheeks hollow, and there was a hardness around her eyes that hadn't been there before. "You're late," she said. "I'm 10 minutes early." She didn't respond, just grabbed Ella's bag and called over her shoulder. "Ella's here." Shane appeared behind her, all 6'3" of him filling the doorway. He had the build of someone who worked with his hands and the eyes of someone who enjoyed using them for violence. A beer dangled from his left hand despite it being barely 4 in the afternoon. "Downey," Shane said, the name thick with contempt. "Carol." Matthew kept his voice even. "Take care of my daughter. She ain't your daughter this weekend. She's ours." Shane's smile didn't reach his eyes. "We got some family visiting. Gonna teach her some respect about how things work in a real family." The threat was subtle but unmistakable. Matthew caught Ella's frightened glance and gave her what he hoped was a reassuring nod. "I'll pick you up Sunday at 6. He waited until they closed the door, then sat in his truck and made 3 phone calls. The first was to his lawyer, leaving a message about documenting the interaction. The second was to a buddy who still worked in intelligence, asking for updated information on Shane Carroll. The third was to Gerard Lucas, his former squad mate who now ran a private investigation firm. "I need surveillance on address," Matthew said. "And I need it yesterday." Gerard didn't ask questions. They'd bled together in places that didn't exist on any map. "Send me the details. I'll have eyes on it within the hour." Matthew spent Saturday morning at the gun range, putting rounds through his Sig Sauer with mechanical precision. Muscle memory from a life he'd try to leave behind. His phone buzzed with updates from Gerard. Surveillance was in place. Nothing unusual to report yet. But something gnawed at him. That look in Shane's eyes. The way Nikki had avoided his gaze entirely. The mention of family visiting. He'd done some digging on Nikki's family after the divorce. Her father, Clayton Richmond, owned a used car dealership that was likely a front for moving stolen vehicles. Two of her cousins had done time for armed robbery. The Richmonds were small-time criminals who thought they were big-time players, the kind of people who confused meanness with strength. His phone rang at 2:47 p.m. Unknown number. "Yeah, is this Matthew Downey?" A woman's voice strained. "Who's asking?" "This is May Estes. I live next door to your ex-wife. I think you should come here. Now." His blood went cold. "What happened?" "I heard screaming. A little girl screaming. And then it stopped." He was already moving to his truck. "Did you call 911? "I tried. Your ex-wife's father came out and said if I called the cops, he'd burn my house down. He's got all these men with him, just standing around like they own the street." Matthew's mind shifted into operational mode, the civilian veneer falling away. "I'm 15 minutes out. Stay inside. Lock your doors." He made it in 12 minutes, breaking every traffic law. The street was quiet when he arrived, deceptively peaceful. 3 pickups and a black SUV clustered around Nikki's house. Men stood in the yard, smoking cigarettes, their postures deliberately casual but alert. He recognized Clayton Richmond immediately. 60s, gray hair slicked back, wearing a leather jacket despite the heat. 4 younger men flanked him, all with the same hard features that marked them as family. Matthew parked at the curb and walked toward the house with measured steps. The men in the yard tracked his movement. "Downey," Clayton called out. "You ain't supposed to be here until tomorrow." "Where's my daughter?" "She's resting. Had a little accident." The word accident landed like a punch. Matthew's hands curled into fists, but he kept his voice level. "I want to see her. Now." "That ain't how this works." Clayton stepped forward, and Matthew noticed the bulge under his jacket. "Nikki's got custody this weekend. You don't got rights here. If something happened to Ella." "I told you. Accident. Girl had a smart mouth. Needed to learn some manners. Shane was just teaching her." Matthew moved before Clayton finished the sentence. 3 quick steps, and he had the older man by the throat, slamming him against the SUV. The cousins reached for their weapons, but Matthew already had Clayton's gun, pressing it under the man's chin. "Where is my daughter?" A voice from the house stopped everyone. "Matthew, don't." Nikki stood in the doorway, her face pale. Behind her, Shane appeared, and Matthew saw it on his hands, blood. Fresh blood. Something inside Matthew broke then, a dam giving way to a flood of cold calculation. He released Clayton and moved toward the house. The cousins closed in, forming a wall, but Matthew didn't slow. "Get out of my way." "Or what?" This from Shane, who'd stepped onto the porch. "You gonna kill all of us?" "There's 12 of us, Downey, and we're all armed." "Move." Shane's smile was ugly. She had it coming. Disrespectful little brat. Told me I wasn't her real daddy. So I showed her what happens when you don't respect your elders. Took a baseball bat to her legs. Both of them. Heard them snap real nice. The world telescoped down to a pinpoint of white-hot fury, but Matthew's training held. Emotion was the enemy. Emotion got you killed. Nikki actually laughed, a broken, hollow sound. That'll teach her respect. Matthew looked at his ex-wife, this stranger wearing a familiar face, and felt nothing but contempt. He walked past the cousins. They led him, thinking they had the numbers, and into the house. Ella lay on the couch in the living room, her face gray with shock and pain. Both her legs were twisted at unnatural angles, the fractures obvious even from the doorway. Compound fractures, the kind that required immediate surgery. He was beside her in 2 strides, checking her pulse, her breathing. She was conscious but barely, her eyes unfocused. "Daddy," she whispered. "I got you, baby. I got you." He lifted her as gently as he could, and she screamed, a sound that would haunt him forever. But he didn't stop. Couldn't stop. The cousins had moved inside now, forming a semicircle between Matthew and the front door. 10 of them, plus Clayton and Shane, all armed, all watching him with predator eyes. Clayton pulled his gun, put her down. Now, the others followed suit. 12 weapons trained on him, on his daughter. "Put her down, or we start shooting," Clayton repeated. Matthew smiled then, an expression that had made hardened terrorists reconsider their life choices. He gently lowered Ella onto the couch, whispering, "Close your eyes, sweetheart. Don't look." As he straightened, his right hand moved to his jacket pocket. Slowly, carefully, making sure they all saw. He pulled out a phone, but not his regular phone. This one was older, ruggedized, with a single red button under a protective cover. Clayton's eyes widened with recognition. Several of the cousins actually took a step back. "No," Clayton breathed. "That's not possible. Those were decommissioned." Most of them were. Matthew's smile never wavered. "I kept one. Call it a retirement gift." Shane looked confused. "What the hell is that?" Clayton's face had gone sheet white. "It's a dead man's switch, linked to enough C4 to level this entire block." Matthew flipped open the protective cover with his thumb. "Actually, Clayton, it's linked to something much worse. 3 blocks. Every house. Every building. I spent the last 2 years mapping this neighborhood, knowing exactly where Nikki would end up. Shane's predictable like that. And last night, while you were all drinking and planning how to hurt my daughter, I was planting presents." The lie came easily because it was built on truth. The truth of what he'd been capable of in his old life. The truth that men like these knew about men like him. "You're bluffing," Shane said, but his voice wavered. "Am I?" Matthew's thumb hovered over the button. "Want to test that theory? Because I died a long time ago in a cave in Afghanistan. What's standing here is just a ghost, and ghosts don't fear death. But you do. All of you." A wet spot appeared on Shane's jeans. Then another on one of the cousins' pants. The smell of urine filled the room as fear took hold. "Here's what's going to happen," Matthew said quietly. "I'm going to pick up my daughter. I'm going to walk out that door. And none of you are going to move. Because if anyone even breathes wrong, I press this button and we all meet God together. And boys," his eyes swept across them, "I don't think you want to explain to him what you did today." He moved to Ella, lifting her again despite her cries of pain. The men parted like the Red Sea, backing away, some of them openly weeping. Clayton found his voice. "This isn't over." "Yes, it is. Because tomorrow, every single one of you is going to receive a package. Photos, documents, evidence of every crime you've ever committed. The police will get copies. The FBI, the IRS. And that's just the beginning." Matthew paused at the door. "Unless you make this right. What do you want?" "Confessions. All of you. Written, signed, witnessed. We did here today. What Shane did to my daughter. Nikki's complicity. Everything. You deliver those confessions to my lawyer by Monday noon, or those packages go out. And if we do," Clayton's voice shook, "then you get to spend the rest of your miserable lives looking over your shoulders, wondering if I'm coming. Wondering if today's the day the ghost catches up to you." Matthew's smile turned arctic. "Sweet dreams, gentlemen." He walked out into the afternoon sun, carrying his broken daughter, and not one of them tried to stop him. The emergency room at St. Catherine's Hospital became a blur of white coats and urgent voices. Matthew stayed with Ella through the intake, through the x-rays that confirmed what he already knew, bilateral compound fractures of both femurs, requiring immediate surgery. Dr. Hector Wu, the orthopedic surgeon on call, looked at the images and then at Matthew with questions in his eyes. "How did this happen?" "Her mother's husband beat her with a baseball bat." Wu's jaw tightened. "I'm mandated to report this." "Good. Report it to Detective Aaron Mays at the precinct. Tell him Matthew Downey sent you." Mays was an old contact, someone who'd helped Matthew with background checks when he'd been vetting security hires. More importantly, Mays was honest, a rarity in a department riddled with corruption. While Ella was prepped for surgery, Matthew made calls. First his lawyer, Willard Gibbs, who'd handled the divorce and had warned him repeatedly about Nikki's deteriorating judgment. They did what? Gibbs sounded incredulous. Both legs, compound fractures, multiple witnesses, including a neighbor who heard the screaming. Jesus Christ. I'll file for emergency custody tonight. With this, you'll have sole custody by Tuesday. That's not enough. What are you planning, Matthew? Nothing illegal. Yet, the second call went to Gerard Lucas, who'd been monitoring the surveillance. Tell me you got it all. Every second. Audio and video. Shane bragging about it. Nikki laughing. The whole Richmond family showing up to intimidate witnesses. It's damning. Gerard paused. What's the play? How fast can you make copies? I need them distributed to specific people. Give me the list. I'll have it done by morning. The third call was the most dangerous. A number he'd sworn never to use again, connected to people he'd tried to leave behind. It rang 4 times before a gravelly voice answered. Downey, thought you were dead. Not yet, Saul. Saul Watson had been his handler during the last 5 years of Black Ops. The man who'd pulled strings when strings needed pulling, who'd made problems disappear when disappearing was the only option. What do you need? Information and leverage. Matthew laid out the situation in clinical terms, stripping away the emotion. The Richmond family. I need everything, bank accounts, properties, criminal associations. Things that won't show up in normal databases. This personal, it's my daughter. Silence on the line, then you'll have it in 4 hours. And Matthew, be careful. Once you start down this road. I know. I've been down it before. Dr. Wu emerged from surgery at 11:47 p.m. She's stable. We inserted titanium rods in both femurs. The recovery will be long, months of physical therapy. But she'll walk again. Brain damage? Psychological trauma? Too early to tell on the psychological front. No brain damage, but she went into shock. Her body's been through massive trauma. We removed his surgical cap, and Matthew saw the anger there. I've seen combat injuries that looked better. Whoever did this will pay. Detective Mays is here. He wants to talk to you. Aaron Mays was in his 40s, with tired eyes and a reputation for closing cases others had written off. He met Matthew in a consultation room, a recorder already running. Tell me everything. Matthew did, leaving nothing out. The threats, the confrontation, the injuries. He mentioned the neighbor, May Estes, who could corroborate the screams. And this phone you had, Mays said, the one you threatened them with. Just a phone. An old sat phone from my military days. No explosives, no actual threat. Pure psychological warfare. So you bluffed. They believed it because they know what I used to do. And men like the Richmonds, they're cowards. They understand fear better than they understand courage. May studied him for a long moment. The law will handle this, Matthew. Don't do anything stupid. Define stupid. You know what I mean. You've got training, resources. The kind that could make people disappear. Don't become what you fought against. Matthew met his gaze steadily. I'm not going to kill anyone, Aaron. I'm just going to destroy them. That's what I'm afraid of. After Mays left, Matthew sat with Ella through the night. She drifted in and out of consciousness, whimpering from pain even through the morphine. Each sound was a nail in the coffin he was building for Shane Carroll and everyone who'd enabled this. At 3:17 a.m., his phone buzzed. A message from Saul Watson with an encrypted link. The file was comprehensive. Clayton Richmond's dealership was indeed laundering money for a drug operation run by the Mexican cartels. Shane Carroll had connections to a dogfighting ring that operated out of abandoned warehouses. Nikki's bank accounts showed regular deposits from Clayton, amounts that suggested she was on his payroll. But the real gold was in the offshore accounts. Clayton had been skimming from the cartel, hiding money in the Caymans. Nearly $2 million. Matthew smiled in the darkness. Cartels didn't forgive theft. Gerard arrived at dawn with a duffel bag. Copies of everything. Video evidence, witness statements I collected from May Estes and 2 other neighbors who saw the aftermath. It's airtight. Distribution? 1 set goes to Detective Mays. 1 to the DA's office. 1 to your lawyer. Gerard pulled out a USB drive. This one's special. Everything on the Richmond family. Their criminal enterprise, the cartel connections, the offshore accounts. That goes to someone else. Boo, you don't want to know. Gerard studied him. We've been through hell together, Matt. I know that look. Whatever you're planning is necessary. Matthew took the USB drive. These people broke my daughter's legs and laughed about it. The law will put them away for a few years, maybe, but I'm going to make sure they lose everything. Their freedom, their money, their lives as they know it. And if it blows back on you, then it does. But Ella gets justice. Real justice. By Monday morning, the confessions Matthew had demanded never materialized. He hadn't expected them to. Clayton Richmond wasn't the type to admit defeat, just to regroup and wait for another opportunity. That was fine. Matthew had planned for that too. The first domino fell at 10:32 a.m. when the FBI raided Clayton's dealership. The warrant cited evidence of money laundering and trafficking in stolen vehicles. By noon, Clayton and 5 of his cousins were in federal custody. The second domino fell at 1:15 p.m. when the DA filed charges against Shane Carroll, aggravated assault on a minor, child endangerment, attempted murder. Bail was set at $500,000. The third domino fell at 3 p.m. when Nikki was arrested as an accessory. She'd been present during the assault and had failed to intervene or seek medical help. Her bail was set at $200,000. But those were just the legal dominoes. The illegal ones would fall harder. At 4:47 p.m., Matthew received a call from an unlisted number. A voice spoke in Spanish-accented English. "We receive your package, Senior Downey. The information about Clayton Richmond's financial indiscretions. I thought you'd want to know. Indeed, we appreciate citizens who help us maintain order in our business operations. Mr. Richmond will have an opportunity to explain himself to our associates. In his cell, where the guards will be looking the other way. I'm just a concerned citizen. Of course. And, Senior Downey? Your daughter. We hope she recovers well. Children should be protected, not harmed. On this, we agree." The line went dead. Matthew felt no guilt. He'd simply provided information to the people who had the most vested interest in Clayton's betrayal. What they did with that information was their business. By Tuesday, the confessions started arriving at Willard Gibbs's office. Not from Clayton. He was in a hospital with 3 broken ribs, a punctured lung, and a message carved into his back: thief. But his cousins, terrified of cartel retribution, began flipping. They detailed everything. The stolen car operation, Shane's dog fighting ring, the assault on Ella. Shane himself tried to make bail, but someone, Matthew never found out who, made sure the bondsman rejected him. He remained in county lockup, where word had already spread about what he'd done to a 9-year-old girl. Prisoners had their own code, and hurting kids was unforgivable. Shane's first night in general population lasted exactly 17 minutes before 3 inmates cornered him in the showers. He survived, but the beating left him with permanent nerve damage in his right hand. Nikki made bail on Wednesday, courtesy of her mother, Priscilla Richmond. But she came home to find her house emptied. Not by thieves, but by the IRS. Turns out the tips about unreported income had triggered an audit, and the government had seized everything she owned. She called Matthew hysterical. "You did this. You ruined my life." "No, Nikki, you did it yourself the moment you let Shane hurt our daughter." "She's our daughter." Was. Past tense. The custody hearing is tomorrow. You'll lose all parental rights. You can't. Watch me. He hung up and blocked her number. Thursday's custody hearing was brief. Dr. Wu testified about the extent of Ella's injuries. May Estes and 2 other neighbors testified about the screaming, about Clayton's threats. Gerard's surveillance video played on a screen, showing Shane's brutal assault and Nikki's laughter. The judge, a grandmother herself, needed less than an hour to decide. Full custody to Matthew Downey. Permanent restraining orders against Nikki Richmond and Shane Carroll. Termination of parental rights pending criminal trial outcomes. Nikki wept in the courtroom. Matthew felt nothing. Ella was released from the hospital on Friday, wheelchair-bound and facing months of physical therapy. Matthew had converted the guest room on the first floor into her bedroom, installed grab bars in the bathroom, ramps at every entrance. She was quiet during the drive home, staring out the window. Dad, yeah, baby. Are they gone? Shane and Mom. Yes. They can't hurt you anymore. What about Grandpa Clayton and the others? Matthew chose his words carefully. They're going away for a long time. You're safe now. Ella nodded, then reached for his hand. I was scared you wouldn't come for me. His throat tightened. I'll always come for you. Always. That night, after Ella fell asleep in her new room, Matthew sat on the porch with a bottle of whiskey he didn't open. The stars above were clear, indifferent to human suffering. His phone buzzed. A message from Saul Watson. Heard about the Richmond situation. Clean work. You good? Matthew typed back, getting there. If you need anything, I know where to find you. He deleted the message thread and looked up at the stars again. Justice had been served, legally and otherwise. But there was still unfinished business. Shane Carroll would face trial, likely get 20 years. Clayton Richmond was looking at federal charges that would put him away for life, if the cartel didn't get to him first. But Nikki was still free, living with her mother and plotting. Matthew knew her well enough to know she wouldn't accept defeat. She'd find a way to strike back, to hurt him through the one thing he loved most. He was ready for her. 3 weeks after the custody hearing, Matthew received a visitor at his home. A woman in her late 50s, expensively dressed, with eyes that had seen too much. Viola Mathis, private investigator and, according to her card, specialist in family matters. Mr. Downey, I'll be direct. I've been hired by Nikki Richmond to dig up dirt on you. Find anything that could be used to reverse the custody decision. Matthew leaned against the doorframe. And you're telling me this why? Because I did my research. Found out what happened to your daughter. Found out who you really are. Viola's expression hardened. I've got 3 grandkids. If someone did to them what Shane Carroll did to Ella, I'd burn the world down. So I'm not working for Nikki anymore. What do you want? Nothing. Just wanted to warn you. She's not done. And she's got help. What kind of help? Viola handed him a folder. Her new boyfriend. Lloyd Lara. Ex-cop. Disgraced for excessive force. Works private security now, but rumor is he's for hire if the money's right. Nikki's been talking about getting Ella back, about proving you're an unfit father. Matthew flipped through the folder. Lloyd Lara's file showed a pattern of violence, corruption, and connections to some serious players. Thank you for this. Don't thank me. Just protect that little girl. Viola turned to leave, then paused. And Mr. Downey? Whatever you do to Nikki and her new friend, make it count. Matthew made 2 calls after Viola left. The first to Gerard, requesting surveillance on Nikki and Lloyd. The second to Detective Mays. Aaron, I need a favor. I'm listening. Lloyd Lara, ex-cop. I need to know everything about why he was really kicked off the force. The official story and the real one. Mays was quiet for a moment. Lara's dangerous, Matthew. He's got friends in dark places. So do I. That's what worries me. The real story arrived via encrypted email that night. Lloyd Lara hadn't just used excessive force. He'd been running a protection racket on the side, shaking down business owners in his patrol district. When one owner fought back, Lloyd put him in the hospital. The department gave him the choice: resign quietly or face charges. He'd resigned, but he'd kept his connections. The email included a list of associated known criminals, including 2 enforcers for a loan shark operation. Matthew studied the information, formulating a plan. If Nikki wanted a war, he'd give her one. But this time, he'd use her own weapons against her. The trap was set the following week. Matthew knew Nikki's patterns. She'd drive past his house twice a day, watching, waiting for an opportunity. Gerard's surveillance confirmed she was meeting regularly with Lloyd, planning something. Matthew made it easy for them. He accidentally left his work schedule visible on his truck's dashboard during Ella's physical therapy session. Thursday afternoon, 2 to 5 p.m., tactical training course. Home would be empty except for Casey Chambers, the nurse he'd hired to help with Ella's care. Thursday arrived. Matthew drove to the training facility, made sure he was seen, then doubled back using a route that avoided traffic cameras. He was in position in his attic by 1:45 p.m., with a clear view of the street and every entrance to his house. Ella was actually at Gerard's house with his wife, safe and unaware of what was about to unfold. Lloyd's car appeared at 2:17 p.m., parking 2 blocks away. He approached on foot, dressed in dark clothing, carrying a lockpick set Matthew recognized from his own training days. But Lloyd wasn't alone. Nikki was in the car, watching, accomplice to breaking and entering. Lloyd picked the back door lock in under 30 seconds, professional work. He slipped inside, and Matthew tracked him through the house via the security cameras he'd installed. Lloyd was searching for something, probably evidence he could use against Matthew, or something he could claim showed an unsafe environment for Ella. He'd find neither. What he would find was Casey Chambers, the nurse, who was actually a federal agent Matthew had worked with years ago. She'd volunteered for this operation after hearing what happened to Ella. "Can I help you?" Casey's voice came through the audio feed, calm and professional. Lloyd spun, his hand moving to his waistband where a gun was concealed. "I'm looking for Matthew Downey. He's not here, and you're trespassing. I'm a licensed private investigator." Lloyd pulled out a fake ID. "Just doing my job." "Really?" "Because I'm a federal agent, and this is a violation of about 6 different laws." Casey showed her badge. ATF Special Agent Casey Chambers. "You're under arrest." Lloyd's hand twitched toward his gun. "Don't." Matthew's voice came from behind him. He'd moved silently down from the attic, years of training making him a ghost in his own home. "Federal Agent Lloyd, you pull that gun, you're looking at assault on a federal officer." Lloyd's face went pale as he recognized Matthew. "This is a setup. No, this is justice. You and Nikki conspire to break into my home, possibly to harm my daughter or plant evidence. Agent Chambers witnessed everything. And your friend outside?" Matthew smiled. "Detective Mays is having a conversation with her right now." Through the window, they could see Mays's unmarked car boxing in Lloyd's vehicle. Nikki was already in handcuffs. "You can't do this," Lloyd said. "I just did. The difference between you and me, Lloyd? I know how to work within the system. I know how to use it." Matthew stepped closer. "You thought you could intimidate me because you used to be a cop. But I've taken down terrorist cells, infiltrated drug cartels, and survived things that would break you. You were never a threat. You were a convenience." Casey read Lloyd his rights while Matthew watched, feeling a grim satisfaction. Another domino fallen. At the precinct, Nikki tried to claim she didn't know what Lloyd was doing, that she was just waiting in the car. But Gerard's surveillance footage showed her handing Lloyd the lockpick set, discussing the plan, even pointing out the best entry point. The DA added new charges: conspiracy to commit burglary, attempted kidnapping, based on conversations Gerard had recorded about taking Ella somewhere safe, violation of restraining order. Nikki's bail was revoked. She'd remain in custody until trial. That night, Matthew sat with Ella in her room, reading her favorite book. She was getting stronger every day, her legs healing, though the scars would remain forever. "Dad, why did Mom hate me?" The question cut deep. "She doesn't hate you, sweetheart. She's sick. In her mind. Will she get better? I don't know." Ella was quiet for a moment. "I'm glad I have you. You'll always have me." She fell asleep, holding his hand, and Matthew stayed until her breathing evened out. Then he went to his office and looked at the final pieces of his plan. Shane Carroll's trial was set for next month. The evidence was overwhelming. Between the surveillance footage, the medical reports, and the testimony of witnesses, he was looking at 25 to life. Clayton Richmond had been transferred to a federal facility after the cartel's warning. He'd cooperate fully, testifying against his former associates in exchange for protective custody. His dealership was seized, his assets frozen. The Richmond's criminal empire was dismantled. Nikki's trial would follow Shane's. With the new charges, she was facing 10 years minimum. Lloyd Lara was singing like a canary, trying to reduce his sentence by providing information on other corrupt cops and the criminals he'd worked with. The Internal Affairs Division was building cases against a dozen officers. Matthew had won, completely and thoroughly. But victory felt hollow when he looked at Ella's wheelchair, at the pain medication bottles, at the physical therapy schedule that stretched months into the future. His phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "Good work, Downey. You ever want to come back? Doors always open. S. Saul Watson, offering him a return to the life he'd left behind. Matthew deleted the message and blocked the number. That life was dead. He had a daughter to raise, a future to build. The past could stay buried. 2 months later, Shane Carroll stood in an orange jumpsuit, shackled at the wrists and ankles, as the jury foreman read the verdict. On the count of attempted murder in the first degree, guilty. On the count of aggravated assault, guilty. On the count of child endangerment, guilty. Shane's face crumbled. His public defender had tried to argue temporary insanity, provocation, anything to reduce the charges. None of it worked. The judge, a stern woman named Rosemary Pearson, looked at Shane with open contempt. Mr. Carroll, in my 30 years on the bench, I have never seen such a heinous, cowardly act. You took a baseball bat to a 9-year-old child and shattered both her legs. The medical testimony described injuries consistent with torture victims. Your Honor, You will not speak unless I ask you a question. Judge Pearson's voice could have frozen water. I've read the psychiatric evaluations. You're not insane. You're not mentally ill. You're simply evil. You enjoyed hurting that child. She consulted her notes. The prosecution has recommended 25 years. I'm sentencing you to 40 years in a maximum security facility with no possibility of parole for 30 years. By the time you're eligible for parole, Ella Downey will be nearly 40 years old. Perhaps then she'll have recovered for what you did to her body and her mind. Shane was led away, and Matthew allowed himself a small smile. 40 years. Shane would be 73 when he got out, if he survived that long. Nikki's trial came next. Her defense tried to paint her as a victim too, caught in an abusive relationship with Shane, afraid to intervene. The jury didn't buy it. The surveillance footage showed her laughing, encouraging Shane. Her own words, "That'll teach her respect," sealed her fate. Judge Pearson was equally harsh. Ms. Richmond, you were Ella's mother. You had a duty to protect her. Instead, you stood by and watched as your daughter was brutalized. Then you laughed about it. You conspired to break into Mr. Downey's home, to potentially kidnap your daughter again. I never meant. 15 years. No parole for 12. And your parental rights are permanently terminated. You will never see Ella again, not even when she's an adult. That choice is hers, and I suspect she'll want nothing to do with you. Nikki screamed as the guards took her away. Matthew watched without emotion. Clayton Richmond never made it to trial. 3 months into his federal detention, he was found dead in his cell. Official cause, suicide by hanging. But the word on the street was different. The cartel had reached him despite protective custody. The $2 million he'd stolen had been recovered from his offshore accounts, returned to its rightful owners. His cousins accepted plea deals, sentenced to various terms ranging from 5 to 15 years. The Richmond family's power was broken forever. Lloyd Lara received 8 years for burglary, conspiracy, and weapons charges. His information about corrupt cops led to 14 arrests and a department-wide investigation. He'd spend his sentence in protective custody, hated by criminals and cops alike. 6 months after the trials, Ella took her first steps without the wheelchair. Matthew stood in the physical therapy center, watching her struggle across the parallel bars, her face set with determination. Come on, baby. You can do it. She gritted her teeth, pushing through the pain, and made it to the end. The therapist cheered. Ella collapsed into Matthew's arms, crying and laughing at the same time. I did it, Dad. I walked. You did. I'm so proud of you. Dr. Wu had been right. The recovery was long and painful. But Ella was strong. Stronger than anyone had given her credit for. That night, they celebrated with pizza and ice cream. Ella told him about school, about her friends who'd visited her during recovery, about the essay she was writing about overcoming adversity. Can I ask you something? She said quietly. Anything. That phone you had. At Mom's house. The one that scared everyone. Matthew tensed. What about it? Was it real? The explosives and everything. He'd been dreading this question. No, it was just a phone. But they believed it was real because of my past, because they knew what I was capable of. Fear is a powerful weapon, Ella. Sometimes more powerful than actual violence. Did you ever, actually hurt people? In your old job? He met her eyes, seeing the intelligence there, the understanding beyond her years. Yes, but only people who were hurting others. Only when there was no other choice. Like with Mom and Shane. Not quite. With them, I used the law. I used their own actions against them. I didn't have to hurt them physically. I just had to make sure they faced consequences for what they did. Ella nodded slowly. Good. Because hurting them wouldn't have fixed my legs. No, it wouldn't. But it made sure they couldn't hurt anyone else. That was the goal. She was quiet for a moment, then hugged him fiercely. Thank you for saving me. Always, baby. Always. A year after the incident, Matthew stood in the courthouse again. Not for a trial, but for a different kind of proceeding. Ella sat beside him in her Sunday dress. Her legs fully healed, though she still walked with a slight limp. Judge Pearson smiled at them. Mr. Downey, Ella, thank you for coming. I wanted to personally present this to you. She handed Matthew a certificate, an official commendation for his actions in protecting his daughter and cooperating with law enforcement to dismantle a criminal organization. Your work with Detective Mays and the FBI led to 14 major arrests and the shutdown of operations we've been investigating for years. The Richmond family's criminal empire is finished. Shane Carroll and Nikki Richmond are behind bars where they belong. I just protected my daughter, Your Honor. You did more than that. You could have taken justice into your own hands. You have the skills, the training. But you chose to work within the system, to trust in the law. That shows tremendous character. She turned to Ella. And you, young lady, are incredibly brave. What happened to you was terrible, but you've shown remarkable strength in your recovery. Ella smiled shyly. Thank you. After the ceremony, Matthew took Ella to her favorite restaurant. She was talking about trying out for the school soccer team in the spring, despite the doctor's warnings that her legs might not be strong enough. I can do it, she insisted. I'm stronger than they think. I know you are. As they ate, Matthew reflected on the past year. The violence, the manipulation, the careful orchestration of other people's downfall. He'd walked a fine line between justice and revenge, between legal and illegal. But looking at Ella now, seeing her smile, hearing her laugh, he'd do it all again without hesitation. His phone buzzed. A message from Gerard. Heard Nikki try to file an appeal. It was denied. She's done. Matthew sent back a thumbs up and put the phone away. That night, after Ella was asleep, he stood in his garage looking at the old sat phone he'd used to bluff the Richmond family. It had been decommissioned years ago, useless except as a prop. He'd lied to them about the explosives, about his preparations. The truth was simpler. He'd relied on their fear, on their knowledge of what he'd been, to convince them he was capable of mass destruction. The real destruction had come from patience, planning, and using the system against them. He smashed the phone with a hammer, disposed of the pieces in separate trash bins, and went back inside. The war was over. He'd won, not through violence, but through strategy. Not through revenge, but through justice. Ella was safe. That was all that mattered. 3 years later, Matthew stood on the sidelines of a soccer field, watching Ella, now 12, sprint down the wing with the ball. Her legs had healed completely, the limp gone through endless physical therapy and her own stubborn determination. She scored, and her team erupted in celebration. Matthew cheered louder than anyone. After the game, Ella ran to him, mud-splattered and grinning. Did you see that goal? I saw everything. You were amazing. They walked to the truck together, Ella chattering about the game, about her friends, about the upcoming school dance. Normal 12-year-old concerns. Hey, Dad. Yeah. I wrote an essay for school. About what happened. About overcoming trauma. Matthew's chest tightened. Yeah. The teacher wants to submit it to a national competition. Is that okay? What did you write about? About how you saved me. About how you didn't let anger make you do something wrong. About how you used the system to get justice. She looked up at him. About how real strength isn't about hurting people. It's about protecting them. Matthew had to swallow hard before he could speak. I'm proud of you, Ella. I'm proud of you too. That night, he read her essay. It was powerful, eloquent, and it captured everything he'd tried to teach her about strength, justice, and choosing the right path, even when the wrong path seemed easier. The essay won the competition. Ella was invited to read it at a national conference on child advocacy. Standing backstage, watching his daughter speak to hundreds of people about resilience and justice, Matthew felt something he hadn't felt in years: peace. Shane Carroll was still in prison, denied parole twice. He'd be an old man before he saw freedom again. Nikki was serving her sentence in a women's facility upstate. She'd written letters to Ella, dozens of them, but Ella had chosen not to read them. That was her right, her choice to make. Clayton Richmond was dead. Lloyd Lara was in year 5 of his 8-year sentence. The Richmond cousins were scattered across various prisons, their family names synonymous with failure and disgrace. Matthew had dismantled them completely, and he'd done it without compromising his values, without becoming the monster they tried to make him. After Ella's speech, they went out for ice cream. She talked about college, about wanting to study law, about helping other kids who'd been hurt. "You're going to change the world," Matthew told her. "I learned from the best." Driving home, with Ella asleep in the passenger seat, Matthew thought about the man he'd been. The Black Ops operative, the ghost, the weapon. That man was gone, replaced by someone better. He'd proven that justice didn't require darkness. That protection didn't require brutality. That love was stronger than hate. The road ahead was clear, the past finally buried where it belonged. And for the first time in years, Matthew Downey wasn't looking over his shoulder. He was looking forward. This is where our story comes to an end. Share your thoughts in the comments section. Thanks for your precious time. If you enjoyed this story, then please make sure you subscribe to this channel. That would help me a lot. Click on the video you see on the screen, and I will see you there.